We have crowned our final three 500 champions of the 2025 tennis season, with Jannik, Joao, and Belinda lifting winners' trophies on Sunday. I'll break down all their edgy wins before previewing the last 1000 tournament of the year, the Paris Masters. Bonjour, my name is Christian Bassnight, and welcome to Christian's Court, where I cover tennis from all angles. If you have not yet already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post more update videos. Jannik Sinner won his second title in Vienna and his 22nd career title overall when he outlasted second seed Alexander Zverev 3-6, 6-3, 7-5 in the championship. Zverev was seeking his first top 5 victory of the season, and he led the head-to-head against Sinner 4-3, but Zverev had lost their last meeting, which was, of course, at the Australian Open final in straight sets earlier in the season. I think that Zverev and his team actually learned a lot from that AO loss, as he came out much more aggressive in this match, which he needed to do. Alexander was striking the ball well from the ground, particularly on the forehand, where he can be a little bit more passive and decelerate at times, but in this final, he really applied pressure to Jannik and took advantage of a sloppy Sinner service game at 1-2, where the Italian was broken from being 40-love up. It was difficult for Jannik to get back into the opening set, as Alexander served very well, and that wide serve in particular was working wonders for him. Zverev's first serve percentage did dip in his first service game of set number 2, and here Jannik used the drop shot very well, as he did at the Australian Open final, because Zverev's core positioning was so far back, and he took great advantage of that. Now, after Jannik broke in the second game of set number 2, we did not see any more breaks until 5-all in the deciding set, where Jannik got the final decisive break. And Zverev did have a decent look at forcing it to a deciding tiebreaker, where anything really could have happened, but a net exchange that barely went against him on game point, when he had game point, proved to be costly. I have to give Alexander I'll give him an 8.5. I can never give him a 10. I'll give him an 8.5. But I just have to, because I got to give him credit for being much more aggressive-minded. And it was more fun watching his tennis that way, because sometimes his tennis can be just not great to watch because of his game style and how passive he can be. But he really took it to Jannik for most of this final. I mean, there were times where he did decelerate. It's hard for him to completely transition to being ultra aggressive, but overall, I say he did a phenomenal job, and he drove the forehand a lot more, of course, as I mentioned, but he also was not afraid to venture forward and come to the net to finish off points earlier there, which was a great play. And I think Zverev knew that he had to be more aggressive with the indoor conditions, but I think he needs to adopt this type of game style if he does want to lift a major trophy, because this was a very high level from him. And yeah, Jannik did not play his best A-level tennis, but the Italian still played a solid match, and ultimately he proved why he's a class above 99.99% of the field. Now, Jannik did show some physical issues during the third set, as he was grabbing at his left hamstring, so there are slight question marks for his Paris participation. He does have a shot at regaining the world #1 ranking this week in Paris if he wins the title and if Carlos Alcaraz loses before the semifinals. Moving over to Switzerland, Joao Fonseca earned the biggest title of his career and second tour level title overall, with a decisive 6-3, 6-4 win over Alejandro Davidovich Fokina in the final. Davidovich Fokina had a horrible start, I'm going to be honest. He was broken at love with horrible errors. He was able to get it back to where he broke back in there, back on serve, but Alejandro just could not match Joao's intensity. The Brazilian often put the Spaniard on his back foot and he ran him ragged. And Joao just had too much firepower for Alejandro, especially from the forehand, and 20 of Joao's 29 winners came from that forehand side. Now, Davidovich Fokina, on the other hand, was very off his game, especially on the forehand, where he was very error-prone, and I feel like oftentimes he pulled up off that shot instead of staying down and committing fully, and 18 of his 26 unforced errors were from the forehand side, and he only hit 16 winners. Into contrast, Joao again hit 29 winners and 19 unforced errors. Perhaps Davidovich Fokina wasn't used to that pace being directed to his forehand side, because Joao was really dominating a lot of those forehand-to-forehand exchanges. I say that because he just played a lefty, Hugo Humbert, Davidovich Fokina there. Humbert's backhand was going to Davidovich Fokina's forehand, and then Casper Ruud, he played him in the quarterfinals. And yet Casper has a solid forehand, but it's not as, big as Fonseca's. And two, they only played one set before Ruud pulled the plug. And also, Fonseca had a great serving day, especially on his first serve. He served 79% of his first serves in the box, and he won 75% of points whenever he landed the first serve. And in contrast, Davidovich Fokina, he had a solid 72% first serve in rate, but he only won 60% of his first serve points. It definitely wasn't Foki's best day at the office by any means, but on the bright side, this loss could have been more straightforward. He could have gotten a bigger beatdown because Fonseca, he had 2 set points at 5-2 in the opening set, and then Joao had 2 break points at 3-1, and then another break point at 4-2, and a match point, a championship point at 5-3. So Fokina did fight well, but it's just overall not looking great for him as far as his title prospects. I do feel for him. That's 4 titles lost this year, 2 of which were he had multiple championship points. And I really feel for him. And I think he looked definitely nervous coming out in this final, and that might be a reason why he underperformed. But on the bright side, Felix Auger-Aliassime lost his first 8 finals before finally breaking through and winning one. So I think it's still very much possible for the Spaniard. Not to mention, he's still relatively young at 26 years old. So I think that if I were to bet on him winning a title, I think he will. It just might take another year or 2 before that happens. But focusing on Fonseca, I think Joao, he really established himself as a true force, especially for indoor tennis. I think these conditions suit his game very well. His serve and forehand were even bigger weapons this week, and his first strike tennis, again, I think is aided by the quicker indoor conditions. He also has a very strong transition game that was highlighted a lot this week. He's not afraid to finish points up at the net, and he showed great hand skills too in the forecourt. Fonseca, I think, could be a big threat for the Paris Masters. I'll get into the draw a little bit later, but we do know that Fonseca, there's a strong chance he might be bald for this tournament because he made a bet with someone from his team about winning one of these indoor tournaments that if he did win, he would cut his hair, although he might just wait until after the season is over and just let it grow a little bit for the offseason, but regardless, he will be bald. But not only will Joao be bald, he will be inside the top 30 as he's now ranked 28, a new career high. And Joao, he joined Federer, Djokovic, and Andy Murray as the players to make their top 30 debuts at 19 years old in 2 months. So I think that's such a cool caveat. But overall, congratulations to Joao for a great title run. And I think this could be fundamental in him, getting the confidence to reach even bigger heights and maybe crack top 20. I don't think he'll crack top 20 before the year's end, but maybe crack top 20 around or right before the South American clay swing. Yeah, but focusing on Basel as a whole, it definitely was not as star-studded as Vienna, where all the top 4 seeds were in the semifinals. The top 2 seeds in Basel, Americans Taylor Fritz and Ben Shelton, both lost in the second round. Taylor fell to Hugo Humbert 3-4, while Shelton lost to Jean-Marie Munar with a score of 3-4 as well. And I think that Shelton-Munar result is more jarring to me because that marks the 3rd straight time this season alone where Munar defeated Shelton in straight sets. So Jaume is Ben's daddy now, and I think it's just a bizarre matchup issue for Shelton. I think Munar does a great job of neutralizing Shelton's serve by just chipping it and returning smart, and that evens the playing field a little bit more because Munar, again, does an exceptional job of getting the ball are kind of working his way back into neutral whenever Shelton is serving. Not to mention, in that match in particular, Munar actually outserved Shelton. He had 10 aces to Ben's 6 aces. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see if Shelton can turn that matchup around because, again, for Munar to be ranked as low as he is, I mean, he's a top 40 player, but still Shelton's a top 10 player. But for you to be a top 10 player ranked that low that many times in straight sets, that's wild. That's very wild. Also, Basel was plagued with injury issues. Denis Shapovalov, Casper Ruud, and Felix Auger-Aliassime all retired in their quarterfinal matchups, where Hugo Humbert, he pulled the plug in his semifinal matchup when he was down 6-7, 1-3 to Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. Humbert, he did have a back issue, by the way. Now, there's a question of if these are serious issues or if they really wanted to save themselves more for Paris. So we'll just have to wait and see as the Paris Unmasters unfolds. But Casper Ruud and Felix Auger-Aliassime are still in the hunt for Turin. More so FAA. I think Felix has a more solid shot at getting that potential 8th spot. There are 160 points currently separating the number 5, Taylor Fritz, and number 8, Lorenzo Musetti. Taylor, Ben, Alex, and Lorenzo can all outright qualify with deep runs at the Paris Masters, so we will definitely have to wait and see what happens this week. Now, on the women's side, the final 1,000 of the season there ended with Belinda Bencic winning the title in Tokyo with a decisive 6-2, 6-3 victory over Linda Noskova. This was a very impressive win from the Swiss woman, not just the finals, where she saved 7 of 8 break points, and 6 of those break points saved came in the second set, where Noskova had real looks at honestly forcing a deciding set. So Belinda was clutch, not only clutch, but she just fought so hard because going into this final, she was facing a significant disadvantage against Noskova as she had played 5+ hours in her quarterfinals and semifinal matches combined. Meanwhile, Linda had played just 35 minutes total in her quarterfinal and semifinal matches combined. And that's because Anna Konskaya, her quarterfinal opponent, retired down love 6, love 1. And then, of course, her semifinal opponent, Elena Rybakina, gave her the walkover due to back issues. Belinda, meanwhile, she had to recover from a set and 3-5 down against Karolina Muchova in the quarterfinals, and she also saved a match point in this match, so an exceptional effort from her. This marked Belinda's 10th career WTA title overall, and she will rise to number 11 in the rankings, which is incredible considering she started the year ranked outside the top 480. So for sure, I can see her crack the top 10 and maybe even higher in 2026. Now, looking at Tokyo at large, definitely got to give a shout out to semifinalist Sofia Kenin and then Victoria Mboko, who made the quarterfinals. They played great tennis as well, so promising signs for them. And then also Elena Rybakina, she played great tennis before she bowed out of the semifinals. And of course, she qualified for the WTA finals in Riyadh with 2 edgy revenge victories over Canadians, Leylah Fernandez and Mboko. And also, Elena will be the 6th seed, it looks like, for the finals, as she was originally going to be 7th. She was 7th in the WTA race to Riyadh, but with the whole WTA 500 point deduction rule thingy, they took away some points from Keys's, not only her regular ranking, but her race as well. So Rybakina replaced her as number 6 in the race to Riyadh. Now, we did award a 250 level title, and that was to An Lee, who won her 2nd tour trophy in Guangzhou. She defeated Lulu Soon 7-6, 6-2 in the championship. And Lee has been having a very low-key solid season. She reached 2 finals earlier in the year in Singapore and Cleveland, and she is now at a career high 33 in the world, so congratulations to her. Now, finally, moving on to the final 1,000 tournaments of the season, it is the Paris Indoors Masters, and this is the first year at their new venue at the La Défense Arena. It had been played at the Accor Arena previously, and Carlos Alcaraz, he arrived a bit earlier and said that it has been playing, the conditions have been a little bit slower this year compared to years past, and that is interesting not only because of the whole court speed discussion and the conspiracy that all the tournaments are slowing the courts down in favor of Sincaras finals, but also because Carlos was very outspoken about how fast the courts were in Paris, especially last year. He was complaining and that the level wasn't as exciting, which I do disagree with him about. I think the level was really exciting last year, and we had a lot of entertaining matches last season in Paris, but alas, I do think that maybe the slower conditions could for sure suit the Spaniard. But looking at the draw is very stacked. First, starting with Carlos Alcaraz, he will open against Cam Norrie, who definitely could test him, but I think that Carlos will still get through. And then we could have a potential cousin second-round match between Artur Rinderknecht and Valentin Vachereau. I do wonder, could either of those guys threaten Carlos? I think for sure test him, but defeat him, I don't know if I see that happening. Jiří Lehečka is also looming potentially for Carlos in that 3rd round. And Lehečka did beat him earlier in the year in Doha, so I could see him maybe doing his big one, although Alcaraz did dominate their last meeting at the US Open. FAA and Casper Ruud are on the horizon for that 3rd round in the bottom section, although of course both those guys are injured, and I could see American Brandon Nakashima be a considerable foil to that potential 3rd round happening. I was thinking about having Brandon actually move through to make the quarterfinals to face Carlos, but I just haven't been that impressed with the Americans' form post-US Open, being honest, at least his last few tournaments. And I still think that Ruud or FAA would be relatively solid enough to get through. I think I might go with Casper, actually. I think Felix's injury might be a little bit more serious. So, yeah, going to go with Ruud and Alcaraz to make the quarterfinals, but with Carlos moving through to the semifinal round. Looking at Taylor Fritz's section, the American could start against Terence Altman, who beat him in Cincinnati and will have the full home crowd support. Although his opening round match against Alexander Vukic is going on right now, and the Aussie Vukic is currently up a break in the third set, so I don't know if we'll even see that happen. Another French lefty, Corentin Moutet, is there, who will open against Riley Opelka. I think that Alexander Bublik is a considerable threat as well. He will open against Alexei Popyrin, who actually has not won a match since the U.S. Open. 2018 champion Karen Khachanov will start against qualifier American Ethan Quinn, and the winner of that one faces the victor of Joao Fonseca against Denis Shapovalov. And of course, those two played in the quarterfinals just this past week in Basel, where Shapovalov really rage quitted down 1-4 in the deciding set. Alex de Minaur is there as well, and he will open against either Talon Griekspoor or Gabriel Diallo. I would really like to see a de Minaur Fonseca match the most here, as those two gave us really a banger in Miami. I think as far as picking a player, I'll go with Alex de Minaur here. I think he's overall the safest bet. Yes, Taylor Fritz is there, but I'm a little bit unsure about him and his level, and his section does look a little bit tricky. Whereas Alex, he's had a very strong post-US Open stretch. He has not made a final, but he had some solid results, making the semifinals of Beijing and Vienna. The defending Paris champion, Alexander Zverev, headlines a pretty tricky section. Zverev's little section is actually pretty favorable for the German. I mean, Ugo Humbert was a finalist last year, but there are, again, question marks with him retiring from Basel due to injury, and he gets a tough opener himself against Davidovich Fokina, which is a rematch of the Basel semifinals. But I still think that Zverev should still clear Davidovich Fokina if those two were to play in the third round. But looking up top, Lorenzo Musetti, he potentially has a tricky opener in Sebastian Korda in round 2. And then also, Grigor Dimitrov is back. He will open against Giovanni Pedicart, so that'll be an interesting opening round test for the Bulgarian, who will be playing his first match since that heartbreaking Wimbledon match against Jannik Sinner, where he was forced to retire due to an injury. And then I think maybe the top round 1 match to watch overall will be between Daniil Medvedev and Jan-Man Munar. Those two played earlier this year at the Miami Open, where Munar won pretty comfortably 6-2, 6-3, but I have a feeling that this one will be much more competitive, and I might side with Medvedev. I definitely see this one going 3 sets, but I think Medvedev will pull through and eventually come through. Again, I do think this will be Zverev's section for the taking. Yes, Musetti could elevate his level. And, of course, Medvedev, I think if Daniil makes the quarterfinal, Daniil will be for sure his biggest threat. But I'm going to be going with Alexander to make it through to the semifinals. Last but not least, Jannik Sinner is next to observe. And I think that overall Jannik has a pretty good draw. I don't see anyone really testing him, at least until the quarterfinals. And Ben Shelton, his projected quarterfinal opponent is, of course, here. But I'm not really totally confident in his prospects, as Ben does have a tough opener in Flavio Cobolli. Andre Rublev is a potential third-round opponent as well, as is Leonard Tien. Both Rublev and Tien have beaten Shelton this season, not to mention. And Tien has defeated both Rublev and Shelton this season, so we could be in store for another good run from the lefty American here. There is a possibility that Jannik is not 100% healthy, though, and someone could take advantage of that, but I still think that Jannik can hobble his way to the semifinal round. Now, giving my overall prediction, I will have Alcaraz defeat Zverev in the final. I was close to having another Sincaraz final, but something is telling me that eventually the hamstring injury of Sinner could cause serious problems for him. So I'm going to be betting against him making the final, although, of course, he could be 100% fine. But again, that's really the only reason why I would not have Jannik make the championship round. But yeah, I'm going to be having Carlos come through. I think his biggest threat en route to making the finals is, I don't even know, maybe Lehechka, to be honest. But I don't know. I don't really see. I mean, Fritz maybe could do his big one, Bublik as well. So I'd say actually Bublik could be potentially his biggest threat, Bublik or Fritz. De Minaur, he could test him for sure, but I don't know if he has the weaponry and really what it takes at this moment to take down Carlos. So yeah, I'm going to be having Carlos lift another big trophy here in Paris. That is all I have for this update video, and let me know your thoughts in the comments on all the title wins we witnessed this past week, as well as who you think will take the trophy in Paris. Let me know if you agree with me having Carlos lift the trophy, and if not, who do you think will be our winner? Again, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post more updates throughout this Paris Masters tournament. Again, thank you all so much for watching and for your support, and I will see you all next time here on Christian's Court.